Two men in fake badges storm Mike's yard, threatening his family with lies and intimidation. His blood boils as they cross every line, until the real National Guard crashes the scene, turning the tide. But what happened next will shock even those who thought they'd seen everything. But first, let's go back to the beginning. Mike's pulse hammered in his temples, each beat pounding with the raw, seething heat of indignation. These men, no intruders, had crossed an invisible line, one etched in blood and oath from his years in service. His home was not just bricks and mortar, it was a fortress of hard-won peace, a refuge from the chaos of the outside world. The sanctity of his property wasn't negotiable. Yet here they were, swaggering across his neatly kept lawn like trespassing vultures, their badges glinting with a counterfeit authority that tasted bitter on his tongue. His mind sharpened, recalling every legal detail ingrained from his training, every nuance of property rights and Fourth Amendment protections. No warrants, no court orders, no lawful cause. The very idea that some self-appointed enforcers, HOA cops, a phrase that felt like a cruel joke, could claim dominion over his land stirred a wildfire within. The law was a shield, not a weapon for bullies, and these men wielded it as a blunt instrument. Mike's jaw clenched as he stepped forward, each movement deliberate, radiating the cold discipline of a soldier ready to defend what was his by right. Karen Mallory's name twisted bitterly on his tongue, the local real estate magnate whose greed infected the HOA like a cancer. Her empire thrived on fear and silence, extravagant fees disguised as community upkeep, arbitrary rules weaponized to crush dissent. She was a puppeteer pulling strings from the shadows, commanding these hired thugs to intimidate neighbors into submission. Mike knew the system was rigged, designed to strip residents of their autonomy, but this blatant, unlawful intrusion was a line he would not let her cross. His eyes flicked to his wife and children peering anxiously through the window, their faces pale but resolute. Their safety was woven into his resolve. The stakes were no longer abstract disputes over regulations, but a direct threat to the family he had sworn to protect. Every fiber of his being screamed at him to act, not just for himself, but for the small lives who trusted him implicitly. They deserved a home free from fear, free from these mercenaries who cloaked themselves in false authority. Mike's voice cut through the thick tension, like steel, low and unwavering. "You have no right to be here. Show me a warrant, or get off my property." His words were weapons, each syllable carrying the weight of his experience and the fire of his defiance. The men hesitated, their forced calm cracking like fragile glass. Their badges, once gleaming symbols of power, now seemed flimsy, almost comical under his unblinking gaze. One of them, the taller figure with a voice dripping with condescension, tried to parry with threats of fines and citations. "This is community enforcement. We're authorized to ensure compliance." "Authorized by whom?" Mike interrupted sharply. "You answer to no court, no judge, no law enforcement I recognize. This isn't a police matter, it's harassment." The words echoed with a clarity that made even the street seem to hold its breath. The impostor's smirk faltered, and the thin veneer of control slipped. Mike's stance broadened, his body language a silent warning. Every inch of his demeanor screamed readiness. This was no bluff. His military training had embedded in him a profound understanding. Sometimes presence and principle were the strongest deterrents. They were intruders, yes, but he was a guardian, a sentinel armed with more than just muscle, armed with conviction. Behind him, the garden, once a simple space of calm and order, now felt like a battlefield. The neatly trimmed hedges and blooming flowers stood witness to this clash of wills. The sun, dipping low, cast long shadows, as if nature itself sided with his righteous fury. Mike wasn't just defending a patch of earth, he was standing against corruption, against the insidious erosion of personal freedoms by those who coveted control over others' lives. His eyes never left the two men as he took a step closer. The air between them thickened with silent threats and unspoken challenges. The thin line between lawful enforcement and tyranny was razor-sharp, and Mike was determined to keep it intact. His anger, fierce and focused, was a shield as impenetrable as the body armor he once wore. No false authority would invade his home today without consequences. This wasn't just about property rules or HOA fines, it was about respect, dignity, and the right to live without fear. Mike Carlson, soldier turned civilian defender, had just drawn his line in the dirt. The quiet neighborhood, the peaceful afternoon, those were illusions shattered by the presence of these men. Now, only one thing was clear. Mike would not back down. Not now, not ever. The wail of sirens pierced the heavy air just as the tension on Mike's front lawn reached a near breaking point. When the police cruiser pulled up, its flashing lights cut through the mid-afternoon haze, offering a fragile promise of order. But as the officers stepped out, their hesitation was palpable, an unspoken uncertainty hanging between them and the men claiming to be HOA enforcers. Mike's stomach tightened. He had called for help, for authority grounded in law and justice, but instead he found a blurred line between protector and bystander. The uniformed officers approached slowly, eyes darting between the aggressive figures and Mike. Their hands hovered near holstered weapons, but there was no command to back the homeowner's claim. Mike's words, sharp and insistent, met with polite but guarded replies. The officers seemed reluctant to escalate, caught in a fog of ambiguity. Were these HOA cops truly imposters, or had the lines of jurisdiction somehow blurred beyond recognition? The community was supposed to be safe, governed by rules, not chaos. Yet here was a clash that no protocol seemed prepared to manage. Then, like a beacon from the past, Sergeant James Walker appeared, his presence immediate and commanding. James had been Mike's trusted ally during countless drills and deployments, someone who understood the unyielding discipline of service and the complex dance of duty and morality. His face was a mask of conflicted resolve as he assessed the scene. 2 men wielding fake badges, a homeowner standing firm, local police wavering on the edge of intervention. James's motivations were tangled, a soldier's loyalty to law enforcement and an unshakable commitment to justice pressed against the instinct to prevent unnecessary bloodshed. He knew the stakes were higher than a simple HOA dispute. This was a flashpoint where trust fractured and authority blurred dangerously. When Mike detailed the unlawful trespass and the fabricated authority, James's jaw clenched, and the weight of the situation settled on his shoulders. The confrontation intensified. The fake enforcers, sensing their facade was crumbling, shed the last remnants of civility. One stepped forward, a dark glare replacing the earlier smugness, and shoved Mike with sudden force. The impact was sharp, a brutal collision of flesh and will. The sting of the shove radiated beyond the physical, searing through Mike's resolve like a betrayal from an institution meant to safeguard the community. It was more than pain. It was a violation of trust, a rupture in the social contract that bound neighbor to neighbor. Mike staggered, but did not fall. His breath hitched, not from injury, but from the bitter sting of helplessness that gnawed beneath the surface. This wasn't a battlefield marked by clear enemies and allies. This was a legal and moral quagmire where those sworn to protect could not or would not act decisively. The helplessness was suffocating, an invisible chokehold tightening around his chest. Inside the house, Sarah watched through the window, her eyes shimmering with tears she refused to shed openly. The brave front she wore for her family cracked under the weight of fear and desperation. The sanctuary they had painstakingly built was crumbling before her eyes, and the facade of neighborhood peace was unraveling thread by fragile thread. Each moment stretched into an eternity, every shouted word and threatening shove carving deeper wounds of anxiety and grief. The surrounding street, once a quiet backdrop to daily life, had become an unintended theater of escalating conflict. Neighbors peeked cautiously from behind curtains, whispers of doubt and fear rippling through the community like an undercurrent. The veneer of civility that held the neighborhood together was cracking, revealing the raw, jagged edges beneath. Resentments, power struggles, and fractured loyalties surfacing in the harsh light of confrontation. Mike's hands trembled slightly as he steadied himself, the adrenaline in his veins mingling with a profound sense of futility. Here was the paradox. A man trained to fight for justice, to protect and serve, now standing powerless against faceless intimidation and institutional cowardice. The fight had shifted from a clear mission to a gnawing battle with helplessness itself. James stepped closer, his voice low but firm, a reminder that loyalty and justice could still find purchase amid chaos. Yet even his intervention felt like a fragile thread in a tapestry unraveling too fast. The fake enforcers recoiled but did not retreat, their aggression tinged with desperation, a last grasp at control in a world slipping through their fingers. The sun dipped lower, shadows stretching long across the lawn, as Mike's pain, both physical and emotional, etched itself deeper into the fading light. This was no longer about rules or property lines. It was about the eroding trust between neighbors, the fragility of justice when confronted by shadowed power, and the aching weight of helplessness pressing down on those who dared to stand up. In this fractured moment, Mike felt the true cost of resistance, not just bruises or threats, but the slow, grinding erosion of faith in the systems meant to protect. And as the evening crept closer, the neighborhood held its breath, caught between the promise of safety and the raw reality of fear. The tense silence shattered the moment James raised his radio, his voice low but urgent as he called for backup that carried the weight of legitimacy, authority forged through years of discipline and sworn duty. Within minutes, the unmistakable rumble of military vehicles rolled down the quiet neighborhood street, announcing a turning point. The sharp clip of boots on pavement followed, and then the unmistakable sight: National Guard personnel in full dress uniforms, insignias gleaming in the late afternoon light, faces set with unwavering resolve. The air shifted palpably as these real protectors arrived. Their presence was a stark contrast to the shadows cast by the fake enforcers who had dominated Mike's lawn mere moments before. Where the imposters had exuded menace veiled behind counterfeit badges and arrogance, the National Guard embodied legitimate power, grounded in law, tradition, and an oath to defend the rights of citizens. The community, long held hostage by Karen Mallory's creeping oppression, saw in these uniformed figures a symbol of hope, a reclaiming of what had been stolen. James stepped forward, nodding sharply to the guardsmen as they formed a solid line between Mike's family and the retreating shadows of deceit. The faux enforcers faltered, their confidence dissolving under the unyielding scrutiny of authentic authority. Their bravado crumbled like dry leaves in the face of disciplined soldiers who knew the value of order, justice, and restraint. Words once laced with intimidation now fell flat, exposed as hollow threats and empty posturing. The retreat was inevitable. The fake HOA cops slipped away, hurried and silent, like ghosts vanishing in the harsh glare of truth. Karen Mallory's scheme, once a tightly wound web of coercion and fear, began to unravel in real time. Exposed not just to Mike and his family, but to an entire neighborhood awakening from a long silence. The sting of their deception burned sharply in the cold light of day. Their attempt to subvert justice with fabricated authority was a betrayal laid bare. Mike's chest rose and fell with deep breaths, relief flooding his veins like a cleansing tide. The weight of helplessness that had threatened to crush him was replaced with a surging power rooted in community and law. Standing beside James, backed by the unmistakable force of the National Guard, he felt a renewed sense of purpose and dignity. The guardsman's presence was more than a shield. It was a declaration that ordinary citizens, united and supported by truth, would no longer be prey to intimidation or corruption. The ripple effect moved swiftly. Neighbors, emboldened by the unfolding scene, emerged cautiously from behind closed doors and drawn curtains. Conversations that had been whispered in fear turned into voices raised in solidarity. The veneer of compliance cracked, revealing the simmering desire for fairness and transparency that Karen Mallory's regime had tried to suppress. The neighborhood was awakening, not just to the reality of their oppression, but to their collective strength when standing together. In this moment, the boundaries of community stretched beyond property lines and bylaws, transforming into a fortress built on courage, truth, and resilience. The National Guard's intervention was a catalyst, igniting a grassroots movement that would demand accountability and restore the balance between residents and their governing body. This was no longer about one man's fight. It was a shared battle for dignity and justice, a reclaiming of homes as sanctuaries free from fear. The final image of that day lingered long in the minds of those who witnessed it. Ordinary people standing tall, shoulder to shoulder with symbols of lawful protection, confronting darkness not with violence, but with unwavering conviction. The sun dipped low, casting golden light over a scene transformed, a neighborhood reborn through the power of community, truth, and the courage to resist. Hope, once fragile and distant, now blazed bright and clear. The battle for justice was far from over, but with the National Guard standing firm beside them, the people of this small community found themselves armed with something far greater than weapons: the unyielding strength of unity and the promise of a better tomorrow.